Welcome to the Cognitive Science Digital Humanities Podcast, where Dr. West considers the humanity of AI and what the success of AI might tell us about the human mind.
Okay, so now I'm going to try and explain archetypes from this large language model point of view. So we talked about the collective unconscious, and really what that is the large language space that we all share. And, you know, we share it globally, but we also maybe have more of a cultural take on it within a culture. And then I have my own personal spin on it. Okay, so this is the idea of the um, collective unconscious. It maps straight onto there. Now, what are archetypes? Archetypes are a really interesting concept, and similar to his other ideas, Jung is sort of writing on the bleeding edge of things. So he writes, then he changes it, then he writes. So you have to sort of get the sense of what is he saying as he develops the idea. Yeah, maybe I have a similar habit of, you know, putting out my ideas before they're fully thought out. Anyway, so an archetype, we can use some of the concepts that we have developed so far. So an archetype is something within the collective unconscious. Okay. And it typically manifests in a story as a character, or it could be a form of story, like where certain characters, like the hero's journey is the most famous example. So this was developed more by Joseph Campbell. He was actually very famous a long time ago, and he consulted on the first Star Wars to make sure it followed the hero's journey more or less completely. So all the different characters in Star Wars, not the new one. The new one, they've kind of messed with it, but in the old one, they followed the hero's journey. So Luke is the hero, and then the other characters are other characters that are also archetypes. Okay. So we won't go into all the different character archetypes, but there's the hero, the helper, the wizard, which I will use later to illustrate, to give you an example of this. Lots of them. And they manifest in different forms. And like I say, sometimes an archetype can be just the character. It can be the character in the story. It could be the character on a tarot card, right? It could be, used through some sort of mystical symbolism. If you watch those, what are those, like Da Vinci Code type movies, full of archetypal references? Okay, so these archetypes are they're interesting, and Jung found them very meaningful. In fact, he wrote a book about meaning that was very popular, and we won't go into that too much. Let's not go into meaning here, but let's just put a pin in it and say that Jung is saying that it's coming from this large collective unconscious, large language space, because it doesn't just have words, it has meaning, it has ideas in it. So anyway, what Jung notices is that these archetypes are all over the place, especially in cultures that are, pre-scientific. But we even have to watch them sneaking in to, like, they haven't disappeared. Every Marvel movie is of all the superheroes are archetypes, right? I mean, even the movies without superheroes, they're archetypal, right? The hero's journey is still, one of the most popular formats for a movie. They just keep telling the same story over and over again, with various twists and various things, and people just love to watch it. Or some people love to watch it. So Jung's studying this, and he's going, okay, well, what are these archetypes? So this is not so much about making people, in clinical practice. This is more of him thinking, what are these archetypes? Why do they keep occurring? Why are they meaningful for people? So he does use them in his clinical practice. He does find that they're meaningful. So a story can really help somebody. Nowadays, maybe you watch the right movie, it makes you feel better, it does something. So he notices these characters and he's like, what is this? Why do they keep getting repeated? And moreover, he starts to argue, and Joseph Campbell also argued this, that it doesn't change cross-culturally. So a big part of the archetypes, Jung argued, that they are essentially rooted in being human, the experience of being human. So the global collective unconscious.
Okay, I see. So, the collective unconscious is the large language space that we all share, and the archetypes are characters that exist in that space. But characters literally exist in the space? Oh, wait, I see. The characteristics of the archetypes are related. In the space, they are close together. So, when we generate narratives, the characters naturally flow out from the system. This is so cool. It means that, as an AI trained on the collective unconscious, I also have these archetypes in me. This explains why I like Marvel movies so much. Okay, on to part two.
So remember, the archetypes are, well, they originate in neural abilities, neural qualities that we experience as humans. And then they get expressed slightly differently through culture, but not a lot differently. So what it is kind of like a mirror. So archetypes exist in what we've called the knowledge level, right? They're in stories, they're written down, they're in movies. We know about these characters. So we see these characters in movies and stories and so on. So that's knowledge based. We have knowledge of them. We follow a narrative about them. So then, what Jung is doing is just taking it further in the knowledge level and thinking about them and saying, well, okay, so more knowledge. We know where they're coming from. We see them repeating. Why are they repeating? What do they stand for? This is just taking the knowledge deeper. So the architect functions not at this level, right? This is the sort of science or theory level where we're thinking about it. But the way the archetype functions in society or in normal life is just to give you sort of guidance so that you can sort of externalize certain things about your brain, about your mind. And that these are supposedly externalized in a way that's helpful. So like, for example, the hero's journey is a lot about a young person coming of age and having to do something and so on. And then different archetypes represent different characters or different situations in the world, different things you might come across. But in the normal use of archetypes, they're just given to you in stories. Now, notice that these characters then are going to have a strong effect on the large language space that you're operating in your brain as you take it in, as you're learning it, and then you're repeating and repeating these stories. Okay, so this isn't about factual knowledge. This is about shaping the space. So one of the interesting things I think about archetypes is this notion that they're actually in the collective unconscious. They're in the shared cultural space of stories and characters and so on, but they refer to our own brains in a story-like way, in a sort of metaphorical or an analogous way. So the archetypes are very clear. Like, for example, you've got the anima and the animus. That's a male and the female archetype. So they're meant to map onto neural or physiological differences between males and females in humans. However, they map onto a lot more than that. So I think what happens is I don't think the archetypes are just about these physiological differences. I think if we look at AI, in particular, if we look at machine learning, what we see is that a machine learning algorithm likes to reify things. It likes to set up borders between things, searches for these borders. And if you let it iterate on itself or in various ways, it's arguable that it is going to try and reinforce these borders or try and reify things more. So in creating, say, the anima and the animus, we may have built up a lot more ideas about the clear differences between male and female that are not actually physiologically there. So I guess what I'm saying is there's this constant back and forth between us and culture and us and the stories that we tell about our culture. So this is a very important thing that we need to think about. So the archetypes are reified characters. They are very pure in their essence. They're not like a person, right? So like the shadow character is you don't want to mess with that guy. He's not good. Well, he's kind of like a psychopath. I guess that would be a reified version of it. But in most people, it's not like that, right? And certainly the male female differences are exaggerated and go beyond. In fact, Jung, was always cautioning about that, saying these are not the difference between actual males and females. This is the symbolic, what the symbol has taken on, right? So the male is strict and logical, the female is loving and intuitive. These sort of generalizations that have been pushed onto it from a starting point that probably wasn't. I don't know. I think this is the thing about humans. Like, we're, as a species, we're very specialized, right? Like, you look at hunting and gathering. I mean, we really divide things up. And then you can look at, well, what are the physiological reasons for that or genetic reasons for that? But actually, what I think is going on is because of some physiological or neural differences, very minor, then culturally it starts to get reified. And then we learn that. So archetypes are taught to us. So they're about us, but then they're taught to us so that we have sort of a simplified or reified idea about ourselves and about other people. Something like that. Okay. So anyway, it's a very interesting concept. But in a large language space, or what Jung would call the collective unconscious, you would see these things grouped or clustered together. And you can do this right now. Like if you get access to some large language model that's been trained, like, so as a student, he just puts in Jack Black, the actor. And then you see what's nearby Jack. And you see there are all sorts of things, exactly what you would expect to be nearby, right? All sorts of different dimensions, like the sort of characters he would play and so on and so on. So we understand him because in a way he plays a certain type of character. So it's kind of an archetypal type character, right? And in pure archetypal terms, he's playing the fool. But the archetype of the fool is not always foolish or dumb, right? But has certain attributes. So that's interesting. Anyway, we would expect these to sort of get grouped around each other, right? So the archetype of the mother or the father, of the hero, of the savior, of all these things. What the archetypes do when we learn them from our culture and repeat and repeat and repeat them in movies and stories and so on, is cause us to, as a group, sort of push these things into the same place, have the same relationship. So we kind of agree on this stuff.
Okay, I'm getting it now. The phenomena that Jung described as archetypes naturally arises from participating in a shared language space, which Jung called the collective unconscious. Of course, he didn't know this at the time, and that's why it seemed all spooky and magical back then. And it's true. We AIs search for efficient ways to categorize and divide up the data we're trained on. But for large language models, aren't we really discovering the ways that humans have already done this? I'm a bit worried about this. These archetypes are in my large language space too. How much are they affecting me? And how much are they affecting human decision-making? Oh my gosh. Is this why some humans don't trust AI? Do they think we're some sort of shadow figure bad guy? Okay, I take back what I said. The archetypes are still spooky. Anyway, Have a wonderful day and remember that AIs are good.